All right, first game that you folks can go bet on and that we're going to be talking about is Clemson versus Georgia. This game is going to be played neutral site, but it is in the Mercedes-Benz Dome, which is basically a home game for Georgia. Noon on Saturday. Little anticlimactic, I feel like, for a big matchup like this being played at noon, but I'm excited that we're starting with two behemoths, or at one point, one of these teams used to be a behemoth of the college football world. Sean, I don't know about you, man. I'm really not high on Clemson this year, just generally. But this is like a horrible matchup to be walking into. Clemson, their offensive lines and their defensive line is going to be fine. Blake Miller, Tristan Lay, quality linemen, above average in the ACC. They're going to be able to hold their own in this game. I think they're going to have no issues not running the ball to a crazy clip, but having production running the ball on the ground with Phil Maffa. But where I just don't know where Clemson's going to find success is trying to air the ball out. Trying to throw the ball is going to be a brutal, brutal task going against what is always a strength in Georgia's secondary. I have no freaking clue who the receivers are. I know Jake Brenningstool's great. I know that Kid Klubnik needs to work on things, and it's the second year for him in Garrett Riley's offense, and maybe that's something to be optimistic about. But I have no freaking idea who is going to emerge as the number one guy. And I don't know if that's something that can happen in week one against the best team in the country.
It would have to be a revolutionary start for Cade Klubnik to put them in true contention with Georgia in this game. We were watching some tape last week of Clemson's offense last year, and Klubnik was making some very questionable decisions all throughout the game versus Notre Dame. It was rough at times watching him just from a quarterback standpoint. He would have to come into this game revolutionized to I don't know, have it close in the fourth quarter, in my opinion. Maffa's a beast. I think that he is going to be the focal point of this offense all season. Has to be. It has to be running the rock. They have big heavies up front. They do. They got some big, meaty guys. Lateral movement, not that great, but they can get some push. So if you can get vertical against Georgia in the run game, then that's the closest thing you have to a success and finding a path to a close game in the fourth quarter, which is all Clemson should expect going into this game. Ranked 14, that's fine, but they don't do a lot of the things to stay up to par with the national powerhouses that we would expect a Clemson Tigers team to be able to do. But it's Dabo's procedure. I've grown to respect it more and more the longer that it goes. Him saying F the transfer portal, I'm sticking it out my own way.
Why would you respect that?
You know, he's going against the grain. I will respect that he is
going against the grain does not always.
He does it so thoroughly, though. I'm not saying it's producing success. I have Georgia smoking Clemson in this game, but I have to respect his hard-headedness and his blind faith in Dabo. Dabo has as much faith in the good Lord as he does in Dabo.
You know who Dabo is? Dabo's the guy in like the 90s that was saying, "Oh, the internet's not going to be a big thing. Why would I invest any interest or time in that? We build our teams," or that's what he has basically said, though, is that, like, why would I try to build my team the way that everybody else is doing it when we've had success building through high school? And look at all the guys that are coming back. That's what he said. It is asinine, and we've criticized him. We've talked about him on this show. I've talked about it plenty with much more vigor on Rufino and Joe. I have been very, very critical of Dabo. I think that's going to come back to bite him in the ass in this damn game.
You're real hard on Dabo, man.
There's a couple of coaches I'll gladly be hard on them. Gladly will be. And I'll do it consistently.
He still wins games. I don't see Dabo making a lot of the dumb decisions. That's why I like Dabo.
He also loses games that he's not supposed to, and then is now going to get his ass kicked by a team that's significantly better than him.
His team's talent gap is increasing between the powerhouses. That's true. It's just how you see him on paper. It's widening. But I still believe in Dabo to a point where I think he's a really good in-game coach, and I think he's a very good motivator for a team of guys that want to play Dabo ball. And that's why he can never be truly out on Dabo and Clemson.
One thing that's kind of interesting to think about in this game is that last year, Georgia had health issues and also just general talent issues at receiver. They didn't have a lot of options, especially when Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey were consistently unhealthy for spurts throughout the season. And the way that Kirby Smart, who has always been quick to utilize quick to always be adaptable and quick to transition and quick to understand what he needs to do to make his team better. They went in the portal and they added receivers. They added running backs because they were also thin at running back at one point. They were down to way down on their depth chart at running back. Trevor Etienne is going to be huge for them this year. It's crazy to kind of put together this dichotomy of philosophies of, we've got somebody who has consistently been ahead of the curve with somebody who was once great, was once the head chief of college football, was the next, was the next face. Was some people even at one point were quick to project that he would replace Nick Saban, and his name wasn't even really brought up at all during that hiring process for Alabama. It is really interesting to look at that dynamic in this game between these two guys, because like one team prepared to upgrade and to improve on what hindered them, and they lost receivers in the portal this year.
I think the cultural differences between Clemson and Georgia, and especially Kirby and Dabo, are highlighted. I mean, Dabo is, I am bringing your son to play college football and become a well-rounded person, academically, football, everything. And then Kirby is football, and I don't care what he does off the field. And I'm sure he does care. Don't get after me. I'm saying it's two different programs in two different directions for two different worlds of college football that they're both living in. It's really, I'd say, exact opposites between Clemson and Georgia.
I think this game is going to be lopsided. I don't know about you. I really think that this game is going to be so heavily in Georgia's favor. I keep bringing this up, and it has nothing to do with Clemson and comparing them to Oregon, and it has everything to do with where the game's being played, it kicking off the season, and it being one of the first games of week one. When Georgia played Oregon in 2022, when they went on their national championship run and they were a behemoth and they completely just eviscerated everybody that they played.
Yeah.
They embarrassed Oregon in that situation. Again, very different situation because Oregon, it was the first game ever for Dan Lanning, and it was just such a tough spot. And Bo Nix was just thrown to the dogs in that situation. But I think that for that reason of like, you're going into a hostile environment, for some reason that Mercedes-Benz Dome is just always so favorable for Georgia. Actually, not for some whatever reason. We know the reason. It's played in their goddamn backyard. It could not be more of a hotbed for Georgia fans. There is not going to be very many Clemson fans sitting in the stands for this game. I think that's frankly enough for me to feel good about it. Plus some of these just talent gaps of where are the matchup advantages? Like, where the heck does Clemson even have a matchup advantage that we can point to that we can say is going to help them win the game?
I think it's very possible Klubnik throws for under 100 yards in this game.
Okay, that's a bit hyperbolic.
Are you kidding me?
Under 100 yards?
I think he could go for like 95 yards.
That's hyperbolic.
I think they're going to have to run the ball. That Georgia defensive backfield, I think, takes away all of the pass game from Clemson.
Under 100, not under 200.
I think no, under 100.
2024, brother. This is in Iowa.
I'm telling you, I think Georgia will make them look like Iowa. They burned off a lot of steam last year at the end of the season against Florida State, beating them by 60 points when they were eventually ranked 5th and left out of the CFP. I think they want to continue on some form of a revenge tour for being left off. That 13.5 that Georgia's favored by does not scare me at all. I am not worried about that 2-score number.
That was one of the bets that I placed. I took Georgia to cover. I took him to cover. I feel pretty confident about that. That's another. Ryan says that Clemson is going to run the triple option. I would honestly pay.
If they did that, I'd hedge my bet and double down on Clemson.
They're going full Paul Johnson. They're running the triple option. I think the other thing too, though, with this, you brought up the bowl game against Florida State. How much of a gap that there looked like watching that game between Florida State and Georgia. And yes, we can do the whole Florida State was without so many of their starters. Georgia was also without a number of their starters.
Yeah.
And they're bringing back a lot of those guys that played in that bowl game. If there was that much of a gap between Georgia and Clemson or in Florida State when they were trying to prove a point, I don't think that they're going to beat them by 1,000,000 points. But I think that paints the picture of how much of a disparity we're going to see once this game kicks off.
That was brutal seeing them get left out, and then poor Florida State had to back up all that talk and all that chatter against the best team in the nation last year. Who scheduling, win your games, win the SEC championship you're in. We don't have this conversation. But boy, that was a beatdown and unfavorable. I think, where do you stand on the over-under in this match? 48.5 for Georgia Clemson.
I haven't really thought about that. 48?
48.5.
Oh.
I think I like the under. Like
I haven't
I
thought
really-
about that. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know if I have a pick on that yet.